Hello there, welcome to your very first tutorial on getting started with C. Now in this tutorial what we are going to do is we will be discussing the very basic fundamentals of programming in general, because if you are going to learn any programming language it is essential that you know the basics of programming. So that is what we are going to do in this one, and I'll also try to answer a few basic stupid questions like what is programming, and I'll tell you a bit about the various programming styles used by programmers all over the world. So enough of me talking, then let's get started with introduction to programming. The very first question which comes up when we are talking about programming is what does programming actually mean? Now if you go and Google it up, what you guys will get is that a programmer is an organism that turns caffeine and pizza into software. Well, now I do agree that this definition is indeed quite neat, but hey, let's have a look at a more formal one. Programming is basically the process of giving instructions to the computer or machine in the form that it understands, right? So as we all know, machines are made up of switches, and switches have only two states: either the switch is on or the switch is off, right? So that is how the data is represented in the memory, and that is how it all started. It all began with the advent of Boolean algebra, the language of zeros and ones. Now what happens is that all the alphabets, all the numbers and all the special symbols have been assigned a unique sequence of zeros and ones, and that is how they are represented in the memory. What this means is that a computer does not look at A as an A, it looks at A as a collection of zeros and ones, right? And that is how it deals with it. So earlier we had these huge multi-story, I don't think even we should call them computers, but we had these huge multi-story buildings which could perform only simple arithmetic operations like addition, subtraction, and even for doing that they took hours, right? So next these boxes started popping up. Now they did look a bit neat, but again the programming capabilities were very limited. And where have we reached today? We have all-in-ones, we have smartphones, which basically consist of a single chip, and we can do anything that we can think of. We can contact anyone anywhere in the world, we can track anything, we can book movies sitting at home. So you know, the possibilities are simply endless. So how did all this happen? Again, there are two parts to it. The first is the hardware aspect and the second one is the software part. In this series we will be dealing with the software aspect. So again, now I'll be telling you guys about the history of programming, how we began and where we are currently. So when it comes to programming, we need to talk about two fundamental things. The first one is the programming paradigms and the second are the programming languages. So let's get started with programming paradigms. Now what is a paradigm? A paradigm is basically a method used for doing anything, right? So programming paradigms are basically techniques which are used by programmers all over the world for different applications. There are different techniques which are suitable for different applications, and we sometimes even use a hybrid of them for getting the most out of a code. So the very first programming paradigm is the monolithic programming style, which was used in early languages like Logo and Basic. Basically in these languages we could only write code step by step, right? We could not do anything else with it. Next came the structured programming, which basically added more control over the data. In monolithic programming, what happened was that the entire data was treated as global and anyone from outside could actually come and edit the data. So in structured programming approach, that was taken care of and the data was made local to the code. But again, in the case of structured programming, there was no user control over the data. In the case of object-oriented programming, again required securities were added to prevent hacking of data. And the latest and the currently trending one is the component-oriented programming language or the component-oriented programming style, which is basically an enhancement of the object-oriented version. And there is only one language in the world at the moment which supports component-oriented programming, which is C#, which is used for making all the iOS applications. Let's talk a bit about the different programming approaches while we are discussing paradigms. So the very first approach is the linear or sequential approach, which was used in the monolithic programming. And what happened was that entire code was executed line by line, one after another. There were no decision making capabilities and we could not do much with our code. Next is the method based approach, which was again in the structured approach or the structured style. What happened in this approach was that the entire program was divided into different modules and these modules work together for getting the job done. The structured approach is also similar with a bit enhancements in the data handling capabilities. Next is the class-based approach, which was adopted in the object-oriented style, and in this what happens is that the data and the associated functions are integrated into one unit called class, which is then used for further applications, right? Next up is the scripting style. Now scripting style is basically based on the client server model and is used exclusively in the web development. So what happens is that the client requests the server to do something and the server gets the job done. That is how the scripting style works. And the currently trending one are the tools or apps, right? So any games that you play on your phone or any softwares which you use on your computer basically come under this category. Now the most important thing about tools or apps is that they are designed for one specific purpose, right? So let's say if we are editing a photo in say Photoshop and we want to edit a video, we cannot do it in the same software. We need the another software for doing another task, right? Again, if you are playing Angry Birds, you cannot play Temple Run in the same game. You need two different apps for two things, right? So that was it about the tools. Now let's talk about the second essential thing, which are the programming languages. What is a programming language? A programming language is basically the way in which we interact with the computer, right? It is how we give instructions to the computer for getting our job done. Just like you and me are talking in English at the moment, similarly we need something to talk with the computer, right? And that is where programming languages come in handy. So programming languages are again classified into two types. The first one are the low level or machine level languages like Logo and Basic, and the next is the high level languages like C++, Java, C#, etc. Now what is the difference between the two? The low level or the machine level languages are meant to be more friendly on the hardware side, right? On the other hand, the high level languages are meant to be more user friendly. So where is C? Right, so C is considered a middle level language. And why is that? Because when Dennis Ritchie, the man who developed C, was writing it, he wanted C to be somewhere in between these two extremes, right? He wanted C to be equally good with the hardware and equally interactive with the user. So that is why C was made in such a way that it bridges the gap between these two things, and C is the only language in the world which is considered a middle level language. So I guess that is enough about the fundamentals which you guys need to know at the moment. I welcome you all to the world of programming, and from the next tutorial what we will be doing is we will be downloading and installing the required software. Don't worry, it is absolutely free, and we'll get started with programming in C, right? So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.